My guest today is filmmaker, painter, and photographer Nouel Riel and her brand new short film, Carpet Blue. Now, Noel's background is in symbolist painting and experimental film photography, and her new film's visual language draws heavily from her fine art practices. Now, working closely with cinematographer Mario Contini and Panavision, they developed a visual approach to Carpet Blue and externalized the film's psychological and archetypal themes. Now, Carpet Blue is her first film and is symbolically inspired by her own experience as a former competitive gymnast. And the film premiered at the Ashland Film Festival's local Lens Spotlight and is currently on the festival circuit. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Nouel Riel and her new short film, Carpet Blue, to the show. Welcome, Noel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I understand that this film is deeply personal to you. So, before we get into the filmmaking, what happened in your own life that made you want to tell this story to the whole world?
Well, as you said in the opening, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. So the film really started with a body of paintings that I was making over a year and a half that was specifically researching and observing how transforming trauma looks in the psyche. And all of my work is about transformation, but I was really honed in on that. So as I spent, my work is very ritualistic and it's really palpable. So it was a lot of emotional heavy lifting to do in this body of paintings, which was unconsciously preparing me for an artistic prompt from a friend who said, why don't you make a work about like write a short film about gymnastics? And I had never made anything about gymnastics in all the mediums I work in for 15 years. And because I didn't really think it applied to mysticism and hermetic alchemy and Jungian depth psychology. And of course it does. So extremely and beautifully. But that's what really prepared me to talk about my lived experience written and told through a symbolic lens, which was the easiest way for me to condense 37 years of experience into 15 minutes. But it's specifically over about a 20-year period where I had a personal crisis happen a month after I committed to a full ride in college for gymnastics to the University of Minnesota. And everything I had built and trained for and moved states for, me and my mom moved to Reno, Nevada when I was going into middle school. And like lived in a motorhome behind the gym with two standard poodles. And then eventually my dad moved and we got an apartment. But all of this had built towards something that then, in a moment's notice, what I had experienced as reality was no longer reality. And that was, of course, like became a very deep wound, but was so important in the hero's journey and individuation process to be able to
So,
open me up to reality. I hope that that's I mean,
well,
I'm
yeah,
going
I
on a
mean,
long tangent, but yeah.
and a lot of these films that I see based on personal stories, some of them are very, very deep. And it takes the filmmaker a lot to actually bring their own personal story to film for the whole world to see and putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a bit of the loss you experienced that ultimately took you away from the sport?
Um, I can
Or just
I kind
maybe
of can.
paraphrase it a
Yeah.
bit?
Sure, sure. Well, I'll talk about it symbolically that when I mean the process of having familial parental figures are so strong, and when the whole hero's journey and individuation process is going out on your own. And I think when some sort of great loss occurs, it forces the soul into an awakening through the disillusionment. And that's really what I experienced. Everything I had worked my whole life towards I had no grounds to be able to stand on in a moment. Um, Everything changed. So when I finally went to college, I couldn't do the thing that I was really, really good at and I had trained for so long to do. So that greatly informed the rest of my life. And then it becomes a journey of, the descent. This is very much the story of Persephone. It's very much the story of Inanna and Ereshkigal, the descent and then the ascent. So that's what I was experiencing in my life for many years. And I didn't really know when this happened. Therapy wasn't like a common thing like it is now. So I didn't know what was happening to me and I had no support. It was an it was a really challenging time and being surrounded looking back, I mean, I'm sure everyone was doing their best and it was a challenging thing to have me be in a really confusing place, but I was surrounded by adults and there was very few who actually cared about what was going on with me because it was about performing and I was not performing, and also I was probably really challenging to try to navigate,
We'll
wrangle in.
we'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
We'll,
yeah,
we'll
but I
leave it
will
at that.
say,
And
yeah.
but I want to get into the character of your film, which is you portraying Ida. And I know that with Ida's alcoholism and isolation, they were not they were not character flaws. They were the symptoms of trauma that she has never been able to process. So was making this film therapeutic for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. Going back to on this question, but also going back to what you were referencing or asking a second ago, when I sat and contemplated what kind of quote unquote gymnastic story I would tell, I actually entertained different ideas, and the thing I kept coming back to was of course my lived experience, because I could see internally a wall between me and the past, and my work as an artist is to go towards and into the wound and like what is the block there, which will open up so much more information and memory and life force, everything buried. So it was wildly cathartic to play Ida. Her symptoms and what she's going through is very much what I've lived. But her as a person, as a character, responds to things very differently than me. So it was interesting and really freeing to play her in a way that's very guarded and very withheld and not over generous in giving. Like that was really amazing. But the
Well,
material. Oh, go ahead.
no, I mean you because I mean when I saw that opening shot of the film, I just sat here and I was like, wow. There was just even in its stillness, there was just so much because where the camera was placed basically in the passenger side of the car, shooting through to the other side with the door open, and you're standing there in the desert, but amongst modern technology of energy producing windmills. There was just so much in that shot that says so much about the whole story, don't you think?
Thank you. That brings me so much joy to hear. Yeah, I mean they're modern totems and totems of motion and movement forward. This is very much a dry birth rebirth story, and to start out with those is really imperative. Whether people pick it up or not, obviously you're so perceptive, and it's something that I really appreciate. But that was really important, and also she's a tiny, tiny ant amongst these totemic figures, um, and that's where she's at in her life. Yeah, and also, when you're asking if it was how it felt and if it was cathartic, which I think you know this, but after almost 20 years away from the sport, I hadn't trained for gymnastics or done. I couldn't even watch gymnastics until a few years before working on this, because it was so emotional and so much buried material. But I trained for 8 months for the film after almost 20 years away. And that in itself was insane because my body, the body's memory, which is so much of what the film is about, the body's wisdom over the intellect, um, was starting to release memories that I had not been able to access for so long, which is why I wanted to reference when I was writing the film, I saw a wall and I knew that that's what I needed to go into. And by physically training, it opened so much material up. But also, what was crazy is I trained at District Gymnastics Academy in La Quinta, in the desert. It's like the Palm Springs area. And the head coaches were so generous. They let me train with the girls from ages, I don't know, 6 or 7 to high school. But if I trained for free, then I had to coach them. So I was training with the girls and I would get off doing bars and then coach them. And it was the most miraculous experience. And every single person was so loving and kind. So that's also an aspect that obviously no one would know about the film. But like after I didn't, when I started training, I didn't know what I would be able to do. I couldn't even do a forward roll on the floor. I literally was like, we'll see.
Where,
And I got to really high level skills and I'm very proud of myself.
yeah, we're gonna get to the ending scene. And I
Oh
want to
yeah, yeah,
hold
yeah, yeah.
that because we're gonna get
Hold it.
there for sure. And but I just
Mm.
love the backstory. But your story is so more inspirational because you had to go to a place that you kept avoiding. And then here you are 20 years later, you go back in, and it's really the environment you wish you always had, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was a part of my, once I became an artist, I was like, well, that was just like a life that doesn't apply to any, like I just wouldn't even really think about it. It was like a past life in this life. And then when I went back in, I realized how joyful my spirit and body feel when I'm jumping on the trampoline and tumbling, like pure joy. And that's why it was so magnificent, truly, to be able to train and coach the girls because they're doing it was so wild. Yeah.
I love it. And you made a very fascinating choice by placing Ida in the desert. It is beautiful, but it also feels almost out, well, I would say otherworldly, like she had been forgotten
Hmm.
by the rest of the world.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. I agree, and I mean
Well, let
it's
me
so funny. Go ahead.
well,
Yeah.
let me put it like this. I really love this film in more ways than one. And as I kept watching it over and over, I noticed that there was so much symbolism in this film involving the past, the present, and the future. And I found
Hmm.
myself wondering whether Ida is actually trapped in the past or whether she's afraid to discover what her future could actually look like. What were you exploring there?
Well, I think those two things exist simultaneously. And the opening line of the film is when what is the line when one can no longer tell the difference between the past and the present, it surely become a phantom overshadowing the future. And it is that's what happens when someone is in the depths of trauma, is that they're afraid to move forward, but they're stuck in the past while existing in the present with no access to the present, which is actually the river of life flowing. So I really appreciate what you're saying because those two things are innately coexist with PTSD and CPTSD.
Yeah, because when I saw that line, I actually had to stop it and I had to think about that line because the past is the past, but the present and the future are happening at the same time.
Yeah, and when someone's stuck in the past, I mean, the projection, the PTSD projection is so strong that it that you truly at moments feel like the past is happening and you can't tell the difference, which is what becomes so confusing with dissociation and disorganized thinking, and timelines become very confused. But when things start to transmute, that's when everything starts to open up and become the capacity for things to become more linear opens up and is very, very freeing.
Well, this also brings up this scene in the film, and I kept going back to it. And I'm like, okay, why is it in there?
Mm,
And there is this wonderful detail with Ida repeatedly locking the door and checking it. You only show that behavior once, but it also tells us so much about her psychological state. Why was that small moment important to you?
yeah, I mean, I think OCD often has to do has is a symptom of a trauma response. It's a really a strong externalized neurosis, and it's something I've had OCD since I was probably 5 or 6. And normally, I mean, OCD comes in many different fashions, but so I don't think that a lot of people would know. But I think that had to do with the sort of both external and internal pressure that I was experiencing. Um, and it would go quite extremely at different times. Um, yeah. And so, like her reliance on alcohol and tobacco and OCD and obviously extreme anxiety and eating disordered eating, which is very briefly touched on. I mean, a third of the film had to get cut, like the actual story and what we shot. So more of that material was in there. But being able to kind of like wave towards it without it being a continual pronounced thing is I guess kind of the art of short filmmaking where you're like, I want to put it in there, but without like banging someone over the head with something.
Well, yeah, and the thing I kept looking at the whole locking of the door scene.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, maybe she has an OCD trait, but it only happens once in the film. So then I kept thinking about the one time, and I thought,
Mm.
okay, the symbolism of the locking the door and the way that she did it was showing that she was still trapped in the past and was trying to find a way out.
I love that. I really love that. I mean, a major symbol in this film are thresholds. And my work as an artist works to exist in the threshold between the unconscious and consciousness. And so you picking up on that is fantastic. And the thing is that I won't say it because I'm sure you're going to get there, but she's locking the door, trying to keep out something that's actually existing within her house, within her psyche space. She's locking the door away from the world and is living with a monstrosity, which
Yeah,
is herself.
yeah, yeah. We're gonna get to the shadow, and
Yeah.
but I got the sense that Ida believes the life that she was supposed to have was stolen from her, and that she had a future as a gymnast, and then something happened that changed everything. Is part of her journey realizing that she has only been grieving not only what happened, but the person she thought she was going to become?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, so well said. And I think anyone with working through trauma probably feels that way. And you're grieving yourself, your child self, and also whenever a trauma occurred, because it becomes such a point of time kind of stops. Yeah, and I think the sort of suppressed anger that comes from grieving not only yourself and then taking it out on yourself, but the perpetrator is such a crazy mix
Well,
of
because
emotion.
when you see Ida in the very beginning of the film, when she gets back in the car,
Hmm.
then there's the scene at the garage, and then she goes home. And ladies and gentlemen, if you watch this film very, very closely, keep an eye on this. There is this, she's holding in, she is suppressing an anger within her, but she won't let it out. And with the locking of the door, then you have her sitting in the parking lot behind the gym, and there's another door. And she's doing everything she can. She really, really wants to walk through that door. And but there's that invisible force there. And you bring up the shadow. So we'll talk about the shadow because I found that character fascinating because it isn't simply haunting her, it's keeping her imprisoned in her trauma. So when you created the shadow, did you see it as a literal supernatural presence or as the physical manifestation of something happening inside of Ida?
Yeah, the second. And I love your perception about things because it's so opening and it feels very nice to feel seen in the work. Yeah, all of the characters, including the coworker and the younger boy in the film, everything is an external manifestation of her inner archetypes happening. So and people have so many different ideas of what the shadow is, which is interesting talking about art or a film and wanting to say enough to inform the audience while and being like, I thought these things through and this is what it is, while also not taking away their capacity for projection and whatever their unconscious needs, or read something as. But the shadow is her inner critic and her repressed trauma material that she is unconscious of. Yeah.
It comes across as scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize until friends were watching. They're like, I was terrified. I was like, really? And then I was like, oh, I guess it is scary
Well, it's
because
the
there's a line.
movement of the shadow, it's the blurring effect. We
Hmm.
never know who it is, what it is, and it's disturbing.
Yeah, it is disturbing. It is literally a psychic disturbance. And the way the blurring and the materials we used in front of the lens was purposeful in the sense that no one needs to know what I went through, and no one needs to know what the combination of so many things is that I wrote for the shadow to be embodying. But we do know that it's a disturbance that at some point has to get dealt with for her to move forward and to be able to integrate.
Well, yeah, the really the great thing is that it allows the audience to have their own interpretation because the number one topic in short films is grief and trauma. And so you bring a film, and the shadow is a character, and it truly allows the audience to have their own interpretation based on the fact of people who are in the audience that may be currently experiencing grief, um, having trauma that they have not gotten past. So everybody who watches this film, I'll say half the audience may be watching this film and they're going to see a little bit of themselves in it.
Mm. That would be the most beautiful gift and a goal. I mean, once, at least for me, once I finish making a piece of work of in any medium, not that I'm not continually informed by it because I am, but it's no longer about me. And in fact, as much of the film is informed by my life, it has nothing to do with me. It's a universal experience. The death and rebirth experience is something that we are going through daily. Like the sun rises, the sun sets, and the moon comes up. And we all know once we're born, we're going to die at some point. So to be able to leave something open to the viewer for them to gain whatever it is that needs to be gained is the biggest goal of mine in any sort of making.
Well, one of the great things about this film too is that with Carpet Blue is that you trust the audience because there isn't a whole lot of dialogue explaining what Ida is feeling, but visually the audience can figure it out. So instead, you allowed the camera, the performances, the environment to tell the whole story. Why was it important for you to say less? Because if I remember correctly, the first line of actual dialogue that showed up when Ida and Jevin were on the porch outside was around the 5.5 minute mark.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in physicality. So, of course, this film is specifically about transmuting trauma, but more importantly than that, it's about connecting, like I said earlier, to the body. And I think being a performer since I was little doing gymnastics and I'm very interested in dance, I think so much more is said in silence, in observation, than in dialogue. And then, of course, when people use dialogue so beautifully, then you're like, yeah, it's banging. This is fantastic. But I don't think oftentimes there's much that actually needs to be said for me. And seeing that silent dance between people and their expressions and how they communicate is just wildly, wildly fascinating to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love short films that have less than three characters. I love it when there's minimal dialogue because there is so much that can be said through facial expressions, through eyes, through camera movement. So much can be done in that area. I've talked to filmmakers and some of them laugh. They go, well, the reason why there's not a whole lot of dialogue in the film is because I don't like writing dialogue. So, but it's still, if you know how to tell the story visually, I mean, we're working with film. It's all visual. But
Yeah, thank
then,
you. Yes.
but then at the same time, I've seen films that are extremely heavy in dialogue, and then I'm in awe of that because of the fact that the actors have to study so much to get all of that dialogue correct and for it to flow. But the thing about Carpet Blue, and it hit me the moment your film started. The cinematography is extraordinary because it isn't simply beautiful, it's telling us something about Ida. There are images in this film that almost feel like memories or dreams. And I mean, it was so funny because when I watched the opening scene, it was that scene. It was the scene in which when Ida got home and then she took the bottle of alcohol outside on the porch because it was evening. That shot, and we'll get to the ending here in a moment.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm looking at this film and I'm like, my gosh, it looks like not only a feature film, it has that high end look as if you were watching something that Taylor Sheridan had done.
Yeah. Thank you.
So
Let's
how did
go.
you and your cinematographer develop the overall visual language for the film?
Yeah. Well, and this also connects to when you're asking about dialogue. Um, my work usually starts in internal visions that I have or dream material. So that is my way of communicating. And being a painter and a film photographer, the first thing that I move on is image and the cinematography. So I made a 160-page visual storyboard before our DP even came on. I was like, this is how we're shooting it. This is why we're shooting it, et cetera, et cetera. Like obviously references to my photography, but also I've always been very attracted to landscape photography from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And specifically for this film, it was about using autochrome photography from, say, early 1900s, 1920s. That was muy importante because honestly, my photography looks like more like paintings than photographs, and autochromes look like paintings. There's something that happens with an autochrome that it is the feeling intelligence of the photograph, not about the intellectual analysis and data. So that's at the forefront of my photography, and it's very, very important to move visually through feeling and intuition and say, okay, what do I want it to feel like specific to this film, whatever film it is, and whatever shot it is, and whatever character it is. So I mean, it was the most amazing gift to be able to take this 160-page visual storyboard and show it to Mario and be like, okay, this is what's happening. We're going to shoot it experimentally with different things in front of the lens. That's what I'm used to with photographers I've shot with for years as a model or actor. And Mario was like, let's go. What about this? What about this? And he's just an absolute dream, the most committed, hardworking, and just so creative and playful. And he held my hand throughout the whole process. And then the gift to be able to work with Panavision. I mean, it was amazing. I was texting with him before we got on, being like, what were the lenses was used? And da, da, da. Like for the shoot, we used a lens that Robert Eggers used in the new Nosferatu. And then there's all these other filters and things that Mario was using in front of the lens. And then on the pickup shoot, we used a lens that they used in the original Dune. So I was like, let's go. We're making visual paintings. That was my goal. And then, like, when it came to each character, one of the characters is not even in the film, who's also like the mother archetype, the cosmic mother. We used specific material in front of the lens specific to each character because I wanted the essence, like if you could see the energy in the air, I wanted that to be seen with each different character because the Mirage figure is a different inner figure than it is with the shadow, obviously. And then the final figure, Ida 2.0, is a different being. She's the alchemical marriage of the divine masculine and feminine coming together. So we needed different material for each. And it was all very, very thought out. And for me, as a performer, if I know that I'm being captured in a way that's really, really thoughtful, it opens me up. And yeah, I mean, Mario held my hand throughout the entire process, and I'm so thankful for him because I was directing it and playing the lead and doing gymnastics, and it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just loved the look of this film. I mean, just
Thank you.
the look, and I know the artistic dance scene in the desert where she's wearing
Mm,
white. Um, and you're right. When you really pay attention to this film, you see these different cinematic aspects to it. And I just love how detailed you were in knowing exactly what you wanted. And
mhm,
and of course, having the right cinematographer that that knows how to listen,
mm,
knows exactly like, oh yeah, I know what lens we need to have,
mhm.
and I've had one where they they were shooting a drama. It was an incredible film, and he goes, we used the lenses that they used in I think it was Halloween. He goes,
Oh,
I'm not.
amazing.
He's like, I'm not shooting a horror film, but I wanted the look.
Yeah.
And it just came out perfect. So I loved how detailed you were, and especially in creating the storyboard, because I have some
Mm,
where they do the storyboards, then there are those that just do a shot list. But
mhm,
either way, it can work out very beautiful, and yours did. But then there's this other invisible character in the film, the music score. So
mm.
And the music score fills in all the blanks where there's no dialogue. What did you want that music to actually communicate that words didn't or couldn't?
Yeah. Yeah, so Andrew Stone Street is the opening song, and he's a friend of mine from years ago, and I shot his album cover. And I had known this album for, I don't, maybe 4 or 5 years leading up. And when I was writing the film, I was listening to it on repeat, that song, and then the end song, which is Scout Willis and Hayes Bradley. Try to remember. And that song I have listened to hundreds of times. And Scout, I also, her first album cover was a painting of mine, and she's an amazing artist and a good friend from years ago. And so I asked them both, I'm like, can we please use this song? Because I choreographed my gymnastics routine specifically to this, and I would choreograph in my mind like what sort of shots it would be. So music for me is, I mean, music is so visual, and it's really, really helpful for anyone who thinks abstractly in imagery. And it was, I mean, Andrew's song, the opening, it just puts you in a specific place and a specific feeling. And that was really important. Just like you were saying, like with the desert, it was really important that you can taste and feel that landscape, because it couldn't happen anywhere else. Landscape is always going to be the platform character of the tone and feeling and atmosphere. Yeah, and the music was amazing. Also, we had Dream Radio, who did the recomposing of the VHS floor music, because it was initially my actual floor music, which was Dr. Zhivago, and then I was like, uh-oh, copyright. So he recomposed this beautiful thing that was like aged and wobbly, and yeah.
Wow,
And then Charlie
that's
Keating
that
did all of our like sounds. Yeah, it was a beautiful combo
that
of folks.
that is really cool. And I never even thought about the music on the VHS tape because I knew that was actually you, but never thought about the music for the routine. And I have to say this because when I watched you in this film, you are a very, very good actress. I mean, there are moments where you're doing almost nothing physically, but we can see everything happening internally. I mean, was there ever a moment where directing yourself and then emotionally inhabiting Ida became difficult?
Yeah, I mean, for the year leading up to filming, I was petrified. I mean, I was physically petrified for at least 6 months. And thank God I was doing so much physicality, doing training for gymnastics, because even like after we wrapped shooting, a few days in a row, I would wake up and be like, because I had to keep everything so tight. There was so much material that I was doing. And this being my very first film, it was so much internal material, and Ida physically changes throughout the film. And being able to navigate that, feeling like I'm not that strong of an actor, I don't, I just, I'm friends with a lot of fantastic actors, and I'm like, I'm just doing it because it's free if I act in it. But and I love acting, but thank you. That means a lot, because it was interesting to nav. The whole time it felt like moving through a tunnel, and the ego is always there to way too high or way too low it and throw you off. So like watching them playback or doing whatever was quite minimal for me. And when I watched it, it was only about, is this working or is this not working, not how do I look, not did I do a good job, blah blah blah, because it's all way 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 too distracting. And also, I mean, this is kind of like a branch off of that, but I went and slept at the mobile home we shot at a day or two before, because I was like, I'm giving this all I got, and I know that now that like it's actually happening, every shot of this film is of me, and that's terrifying because there's so many incredible people that are working on this to make it happen. And if I don't do a good representation, this whole thing is going to be a goofer. So I slept in this mobile home. And when I was outside, like, just looking at the desert stars and feeling it, Ida has so much abandonment going on. And all of a sudden, I started feeling this deep loss in my chest, and it was very real. Like, I didn't have to act it, and I was like, okay, this is fantastic. But then, of course, it turns out in the mobile home we shot in, there was a spirit, and numerous people felt it or saw it. And then of course, it turned out that, like, it was available to shoot in because someone's parent had died. And then on our pickup shoot, we tried to go shoot there again, and the woman who moved in was like, they can't come shoot here. There's a spirit here and it's their fault. I haven't slept in 4 days and I keep finding quarters in the mobile home.
Oh
Like,
my
there's
God. See,
so many stories I could tell you that are like that seem unreal, but making ritualistically the way that I do, benevolently, but I'm just used to things that are shocking. And so it was interesting to see people's responses because I was like, well, the goddess of alchemy is in charge of this production. So when crazy things happen, like, I'm not surprised.
yeah, things like that are very, very real. And
Yeah.
wow, what a story. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about the ending. This
Mhm.
is where the film's ideas about grief, acceptance, and rebirth all come together. So, without giving anything away for someone who hasn't seen it, what do you hope audiences will understand about Ida when they reach that final moment?
That the things that she's been struggling with and the things that she's having visions of are then integrated into her being to be able to come into oneness, like holding the tension of these opposites that are existing. A third is birthed. And I mean, that's what I hope that people feel within their being, whether it's conscious or not. Um, it's an a more it's a buoyant sort of feeling, um, and I think sometimes, at least for myself, like the aggression, for instance, that the shadow has to be integrated for her to be able to do what she does in the end of the film. And I think that we can have a lot of like self-judgment around anger or aggression or rage, but as they're integrated, there's so much more fire for someone to be activating towards making their dreams, whatever those things are, come true, or even towards peace. So yeah.
So, and I know you mentioned this earlier. So, with the final scene, how long did it take for your muscle memory to come back?
Yeah, I mean, the 8 months that I trained, um, is what it took for me to do what I did. And also, the very first shot on the first day of filming, it was like, okay, go. I did a release move, and because of the lighting, I couldn't see the low bar and missed my hand and fell on my like head, neck, back. That was the very first shot of the entire shoot, but it makes it into the film. Like when Ida's drunk and trying to work out, there's a flash. And I was like, there's no wasted shots, there's no wasted experiences. But yeah, I mean, the muscle memory, it started it once I started kind of training, it actually started coming back quite quickly, not because it wasn't physically painful and emotionally and mentally absolutely exhausting, because it was very, very, very challenging. I mean, there was times that I like couldn't wash my face because my hands were ripped and bleeding from bars, and I couldn't walk because my back disc was all crazy and all of that sort of stuff. But I was able to do, like, for instance, like back twisting, that's it in the film. I was able to do that really quickly, shockingly, because the body remembers. The body does actually keep the score.
Well, since you were so detailed in putting this film together, how much thought did you put into the costume design for the ending shot? Not the
Oh,
very
I'm
ending,
so
the gymnastic shot.
the gymnastics shot. Yeah, yeah. The final shot is. no costume, which I had a lot of thought put into that as well. Very purposeful. But I'm so glad you asked, because my beautiful mother, Gina, um, did put like 12,000 rhinestones on that leotard. Like, she made my leotards when I did gymnastics, and made a couple incredible like competitive ones, and she did it again. She just like, it's so beautiful. I was like, I want her to be like a star and shooting through the cosmos. And that's what it looks like. And then adding that extra LUT in post really helped how we shot it. But my mom just like, she was so amazing. She's always been so supportive, and she's just can make anything, whether it's clothes or a fainting sofa or stained glass or drapes. So it was really fantastic. And my mom was in at filming at the mobile home, and was in the film part of the third that got cut out. So it was really wild, because we had photos of me as a baby, and it was supposed to be my grandmother's mobile home, and there's photos of my grandma, one of my grandma and grandpa and me, but photos of my grandma who's passed, who's totally the artistic matriarch of the family. So it was very, very like heightened emotional lineage happening, and it was such a beautiful way to transform generational trauma, like in a very, very, very real way. My mom, we were filming a scene that got cut out, and it was one of the hardest scenes, where I contemplate suicide, and the shadows in the bathroom behind me, and my mom was like, it was really challenging acting and directing in moments like this, because normally I'm very much an emotional caretaker. But my mom was talking to Vincent Giovanni, who plays the shadow. He's a longtime friend and a wonderful actor, and they were talking, and my mom was just having a really hard, being so respectful of my space and energy. But I could hear them talking, and my mom was like, I hadn't she was saying she hadn't remembered things from our past until hearing the shadow talk, and what that was like, and how scary it was, because it sounded so familiar. And so, yeah, it was a wild and really beautifully transformative experience. It was very real. Like, things happened that were very, very real.
Yeah, this film is probably one of the very, very few, based on, with the backstory being a very deeply personal story, in which, how can I put this? Not only will the audience feel it, but you as writer, director, actress, you're living it. And I've seen countless of films on grief and trauma, and they're good, but there's just something about this film, because it's really life imitating art
Mm-hmm.
in the truest sense. And then with the
Mm.
very, very last shot before the credits roll, I was wondering, Ida was free.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not even the leotard was there to hold anything in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That was really important to me to talk about what waking up after a big cycle of transformation actually looks like. And usually what it looks like is waking up looking the same, in the same place as any other day before, but as we open our eyes, we have veils are lifted, and we have new perception of reality, as in closer to the capital T truth of having our perception more unfiltered. And but everything looks the same. And that was really, really important for me to talk about, because I think oftentimes when we're going through a big transformation, it feels like, oh, and then all of a sudden I'll have the Academy Award or an Oscar or a gold medal. And it's like the actual success is getting, to me, closer and closer and closer to the divine.
I completely agree with that. And ladies and gentlemen, Carpet Blue is a haunting, beautifully controlled portrait of a woman confronting the ghost of a life she never got a chance to finish. Now, through Ida, Noel transforms personal loss, addiction, and isolation into something far more universal: the painful realization that healing often begins when we stop running from the past. Now, what makes the film especially striking is how much Noel communicates without saying anything. The desert becomes a landscape of emotional exile, while the cinematography, the music, the reoccurring imagery give physical form to Ida's fractured sense of time and identity. Now, even the shadow feels less like a conventional supernatural presence than the embodiment of trauma that refuses to loosen its grip. Now, at the center of it all, well, is Noel herself, delivering a performance that is vulnerable, restrained, and deeply affecting. Carpet Blue ultimately isn't about forgetting grief, it's about finding the courage to move through it. It is a story of loss, survival, and finally, the possibility of rebirth. And Noel, I want to thank you so much for sharing a very deeply personal film with me, and much success to you and your film on the festival circuit.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure, and you're such a pleasure. I'm very honored. Thank you for your thoughtful questions.
You're very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, if you attend a film festival in which Carpet Blue is an official selection, make sure you're sitting in the audience. This is well, I will say it's a visual feast for the eyes in many ways. And for those of you who desire to be a cinematographer, this is a film you can learn from. If you're an up and coming filmmaker and you've watched this whole interview, you will know that if you pay attention to the details, they matter, and they'll show up on screen and be a blessing to everyone who watches it. So with that, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.